Alright, hello and welcome. Welcome to my very first deck primer here for TCGplayer. My name is Corey Baumeister. Today I'm going to be taking you through Grixis Improvise here. I think this deck is extremely good at attacking Teamer, which I think for most people's metagames that's going to be public enemy number one. Big bombs like Herald of Anguish, and the Thopterus going wide on them is just really hard for Teamer to deal with. So I think this is actually a pretty well-positioned deck. The only thing I would suggest, having a good plan for is up against blue-black. The deck is very popular right now, and it's just very hard to stick your big threats when they're all just sorcery speed threats. You have counter magic, which I'll get to here in a moment to help get through a little bit, but it is a harder matchup. But Teamer, I think, is favored, and Mono Red is super close, so this is a great deck to be playing moving forward. All right, so we'll start with the mana base. We got the one Summit here, 3 Drowned Catacombs, 3 Fetid Pools. It's mainly a blue-black deck, really only splashing red for Thopterus and Pia. This deck really does have a great mana base because you have 4 maps here and 4 Prismatic Prisms, so it's very rare that you end up getting color screwed. So that's a big plus to this deck here. We have 1 Inventor's Fair here, which I could consider upping to 2. The card really does a lot against mono red. It also helps search up random one-of artifacts like Aetherworks Harvester for your aggressive matchups. And Spyglass, which is super important against Teamer, and really just has a lot of versatility against just about everything. Sticking it against blue-black control, naming Search for Ascanta, kind of the breakout card of Worlds here a couple weeks as a huge key player. You can hit something like a Nicol Bolas. The card really is fantastic. I have a second one on the board. Really thinking about upping it to a third one moving forward. But let's continue on with the mana base here. We got 1 of each basic here for Island and Mountain. And that's mainly because of Renegade maps. You really don't need any more. Swamp really is your, or black really is your base color. For the main point that you want to have Fatal Push on your turn 2 when you're playing against Long Tusk Cubs. And yeah, just being able to cast 1 mana removals when you have a lot of ways to activate Revolt, I think is a huge thing with this deck. Spire Industry almost always is just City of Brass. You have so many artifacts that it's going to be on constantly, so this is probably your best land. Spire Bluff Canals enable the red splash to be here pretty free. And then you have the 3 swamps here. So moving on to the spells, we got 4 Fatal Push. It's just too important against red and too important against early Teamer drops. Where if they stick a Cub, they're just going to run away with it. That's one way that you lose in that matchup. The deck is good at blocking Cubs when it comes to a bit more of the late game. But you can't really chump Cubs early on with your Servo tokens or your Thopter tokens, because you need them to enable Improvise for the Heralds or the Mavericks. So chumping early is usually a big problem. So that's why you have the Contraband Kingpins to kind of mediate on their really aggressive draws. And then you have the 4 Fatal Push here. So we have the 4 maps here, which is essentially just your 22nd through 26th land. 1 mana, is basically free in almost all situations. So we have our Contraband Kingpins. This really lets the deck keep going on and let you top deck straight gas by the end instead of fizzling out and just drawing, late game Renegade maps or lands. We have Cogworth's Puzzle Knot, which I think is the best 2-drop here because it creates 2 artifacts here. So you can go turn 2 Puzzle Knot, and then you can go into turn 3 Maverick Thopterus. Turn 4 Herald is really the god draw here and makes it really hard for certain decks to deal with. All right, back to the 2-drops. We have 4 copies of Prismatic Prism. Like I said, it's another 2 mana artifact which help get your count up for Improvise and does a lot of fixing. This card's great. It's also very good with our sideboard plan here. Against control, we want to be attacking them a lot more aggressively. So we bring in Tezzeret's Touch, and strapping a Tezzeret's Touch to a Prismatic Prism. Even if they Fatal Push it or something like that, you get it back and don't lose autocomplete value here, so those are very nice. We have one Servo Schematic, another target for Inventor's Fair, but it's really just another Cogwarts Puzzle Knot. You can sack it to Pia. Yeah, once again, basically the same as Cogwarts Puzzle Knot. The one Spyglass, which I touched on before, and these are really the bread and butter of the deck right here. 4 copies of Metallic Rebook. Most of the time, this is going to be a one blue mana leak, which is super huge in just about every matchup here, especially when you're progressing your board and you can't really beat, let's say, a Bristling Hydra, or you can't beat a Glory Bringer, you know, really gaining a tempo advantage of you. You can do a lot of setup, leave the 1 mana open, and Metallic Reboot, they're a big play. One really all-star play of the deck is getting a Maverick Thopterus out, most of the time only costing 2. It creates those 2 tokens, which can be the 2 tokens that you need to make this a 1 mana counterspell here. Super huge play. It's come up so many times and won me so many games testing with this deck. We got 2 copies of Pia just because they're all around good cards. Against Mono Red, getting 2 blockers for their early onslaught is incredibly important to not get blown out by Ashcop Crasher, or just have another body to put in front of Hezzeret before it eats you up. The one Harvester to end up searching for that with the Inventor's Fair, also just a good card. All right, then let's get to the power of the deck. Tezzeret is unbelievable. Dropping this card and being able to kill a creature right away by ticking down, and then being able to untap and kill another creature without having to tick up or anything, it's unbelievable. And you can just play it, tick up, protect it for 1 turn, tick up 1 more turn, protect it, activate that emblem, and it's pretty game over for just about any matchup when you can make recurring 5/5s. All right, so we got Maverick. Maverick Thopterist here, which really lets you go wide against just about every game plan. Most of the time it's 2 mana for 4 power, 2 of it being flying. It's a card that does everything. Like sticking a Maverick Thopterist and being able to block a Rogue Refiner with the Thopterus itself is great, because after you play the Thopterus, it really loses all its value, but it is like the best card to chump with and leave your tokens so you can do more stuff with Herald here. We got 1 copy of the Scarab God, just as a little bit of inevitability against Teamer here. Just another card that, let's say they're bringing a bunch of removal for Heralds, and they have a good plan on beating all your 1/1 tokens. Maybe they have a Whirler that's getting out of control with their energy account. Landing a Scarab God, especially game 1 where they don't have a coup or anything like that, eventually will win you the game. So I think 1 is perfect here. You don't want any more, because it is a clunky card in this deck. It's not the same as it is in blue-black control when you're building up mana every single turn. We don't play that much mana, so you don't normally get to like that beautiful number 9 where you can play it and activate it like blue-black does, or even Teamer when they're playing all these accelerating cards like Servant. So it's not at its best here in Grixis Improvise, but it's still one of the most, if not the most popular card in Standard right now. Then we got our bread and butter here. We got our Herald of Anguish. The card just really does everything. Like being able to stick this on a board when they're tapped out, even if they deal with it, they're already 2-for-1ing themselves, with 1 with the removal spell, and then another with the card at end step that it's killing. So this is really the bread and butter of the deck. If this wasn't there, it wouldn't exist. Okay, so we're going to move on to the sideboard here. Pretty straightforward sideboard. Everything, you kind of have a sense what these cards come in against, and don't second guess yourself. It's exactly that. So we got our bridges, which are going to come in against mono red, and possibly some other mid-range strategy. It's not very good against Teamer, just because we have to keep in our fatal pushes. And Metallic Reboot is still good against him. So we can't overload on spells. You have to keep your artifact count high, otherwise the deck falls apart. So for red, an additional card we bring in here is the Harvester. But that's really it against red. This deck really can't sideboard more than like 5 to 6 cards. So it really has specific cards for each matchup. The only one that we bring in... Oh, excuse me. We do bring in that Spyglass for Teamer as well. The card is just an all-star. Think about playing it up against a board where they just have Long Tusk Cub. You play that. They have to react immediately if they don't want the Cub to get counters. They have to, or if they want to still be able to put counters on the Cub, they have to immediately put as many on. And then you could just name, like, let's say Bristling Hydra in their hand. So it really forces their hand and does an extremely powerful effect. So on to the Tezzeret's Touch. I think these are mainly for our control matchups when we want to be just a little bit faster, a little bit more on top of things. We bring in Scroungers and we bring in Tezzeret's Touch and Negates here. We bring in a full 10 cards here just because blue-black control, I feel, is a very rough matchup. If you're expecting a metagame full of blue-black control at your next Grand Prix or your next Nationals event, I wouldn't suggest playing this unless we add some extra cards like Spell Pierce and stuff. That was really the problem in testing for me. I played against blue-black control, I think, like 5 times and managed to only win once. So it was a tough match. Round 3, we saw... Round 3, you guys are going to see a really, really good close match that I think... it was played super tight on both fields. He ended up coming out ahead, but it was an incredibly good match if you're going to stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's Grixis Improvise here. Let's get to the matches.